The first thing I noticed was the snap. It cut through the floor like a whip crack, sharp and intentional, the sound of someone who believed attention was owed to him on demand. I was standing near the east window of the 37th floor, reviewing a network load diagram on my tablet, tracing the projected stress points for summer heat expansion. The building was old steel wrapped in modern glass, and without careful balance, it overheated like a nervous animal. The snap came again. Closer. Hey, it girl. I did not look up immediately, not because I did not hear him, but because I refused to be trained. When I finally turned, I saw him. Evan Pike, 26, fleece vest, perfect haircut. A job title that included the word innovation without defining a single responsibility. His father sat on the board. That fact hovered around him like cologne. Are you broken? Evan asked, gesturing behind him at a glass conference room where a frozen video call glared from a wall-sized screen. The internet is lagging. Fix it. We are pitching investors in 10 minutes. I studied him for a moment. Not the arrogance. That was common. It was the confidence that came from never being corrected. I am not IT, I said calmly. If you are experiencing latency, submit a ticket through facilities. He laughed. Loud. Performative. I do not submit tickets, he said. I tell people to do their jobs. You are sitting with a laptop. That means you fix things. The room behind him had gone quiet. People pretended not to listen. They always did. I closed my tablet. Evan, I said, my voice even. I am the infrastructure liaison for this building. I am here to finalize the renewal for your dedicated systems. I do not reboot routers on demand. His smile vanished. He slammed his palm against the table beside me, rattling a coffee cup. You know what? He said, his face flushing. I am sick of the attitude from support staff. You are useless. Absolutely useless. He pointed toward the door. Get out. You are fired. I do not want to see you on this floor again. For a moment, I felt nothing. Not fear, not anger, just clarity. You are firing me, I asked. Yes, Evan said, chin lifted. Get your things. I nodded. Understood, I said. Good luck with your pitch. I walked to the elevator without another word. The doors closed behind me as Evan laughed and slapped hands with his colleagues, convinced he had asserted dominance. He had not. He had cut power to the room without realizing he was sitting in the dark. Down in the lobby, I nodded to security and stepped outside into the afternoon air. I crossed the street and ordered an espresso. I had just taken my first step away from their company, and towards something much more interesting. Because Evan Pike did not fire an employee. He dismissed the person who controlled the invisible systems keeping his world alive, and he had no idea what he had just started. By the time I reached the coffee shop across the street, my phone was already vibrating like a trapped insect. I ignored it. I ordered an espresso, black, no foam, and took the seat by the window that let me see the front entrance of Skyline Tower without being seen myself. From here, I had a perfect view of consequences arriving late. Inside the building, the first tremors began exactly on schedule. Skyline Tower is old enough to remember paper contracts and young enough to pretend it understands cloud computing. That combination makes it fragile in ways most executives never consider. They assume infrastructure is permanent. It is not. It is permission-based. I own the permissions. At 3:18 p.m., the priority elevator queue reset. The polished chrome doors opened slower. Executives waited longer. Small thing. Barely noticeable. Just enough to irritate people who believe time bends around their titles. At 3:26 p.m., the biometric access logs flagged a synchronization delay. That meant conference room doors that usually sealed themselves for privacy stayed transparent. Jared began shouting in full view of his staff, his hands slicing the air like he was arguing with gravity. I watched it all from my tablet. Marcus, the building manager, finally walked into the mess carrying a leather folder and a bottle of champagne. He was sweating through his jacket. He always did when paperwork mattered. His text came through a minute later. Marcus, please tell me you did not just get fired by that idiot. I took a sip of espresso. Tess. He terminated negotiations and dismissed me from the floor. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Marcus. Oh no. At that exact moment, the server room temperature on floor 37 ticked upward by 1 degree. Not dangerous yet, just uncomfortable. The problem with high-density server environments is not heat, it is uneven heat. Once the chilled water loop stops prioritizing the racks, hotspots form. Fans spin harder, power draw increases, systems compensate until they cannot. At 3:41 p.m., the first alert ticket appeared. Server room temperature advisory, current temp 78 degrees, Fahrenheit rising. Jared still had not connected the dots. He sent me an email. Subject: Wi-Fi broken. Body: this is getting ridiculous. Can you stop playing games and fix the building? No greeting, no apology, just entitlement wearing panic like cheap cologne. I archived it. At 3:52 p.m., the executive restrooms failed authentication. Not locked. That would be illegal. They simply stopped recognizing executive badges. The men in fleece vests began migrating toward the public restrooms in the lobby, muttering like displaced royalty. At 4:03 p.m., the internet packet prioritization reset. Their video calls began to stutter. Slides froze mid-sentence. Audio lagged behind lips. A pitch deck designed to impress investors started to look like a ransom video from 2009. I watched Jared pace behind glass, phone glued to his ear. At 4:11 p.m., the freight elevator token was revoked. The delivery of new servers scheduled for Tuesday was now stranded paperwork. Marcus called. Tess, he whispered. He is trying to open the breaker panel. He will not get far, I said. It requires a key and a code. He thinks it is a fuse issue. Of course he does. At 4:18 p.m., the server room hit 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Thermal throttling engaged. The platform slowed. Logs stacked. Timeouts multiplied. At 4:24 p.m., the autosave failed on their pitch deck. At 4:30 p.m., the building owner legal counsel called me. Brenda sounded tired. I assume you are aware of what is happening. Completely, I said. Are you stopping? No, I said. I am complying. With what? The termination of services. She exhaled. Drafting liability protections now. Thank you. When I hung up, I finished my espresso. Across the street, the lights on floor 37 flickered as systems shifted into survival mode. Jared still thought this was a glitch. He had not yet realized it was a decision. And decisions, unlike Wi-Fi, do not reboot. By Tuesday morning, the 37th floor felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just strained, like a muscle holding a weight it should have dropped already. I was not there to witness the first signs, but Marcus, the building manager, kept me informed in clipped updates that read more like medical charts than messages. Server room temperature elevated. Airflow imbalance detected. Multiple badge failures logged and reset manually. Tenant requesting emergency access. They were learning how dependent comfort had made them. I spent that morning in my office below ground, reviewing capacity charts. Omnitech bandwidth usage had ramped smoothly. Their engineers were disciplined. Their systems respected limits. Where NextGen had flooded the pipes, Omnitech flowed through them. At 11:30, Marcus called. They are sweating, Tess, he said quietly. Literally. They brought in box fans from a convenience store. I closed my eyes. Box fans were an insult to thermodynamics. By noon, the executive floor was operating at reduced capacity. Laptops throttled. Video calls degraded into pixelated mosaics. Developers who once worked through lunch now wandered the halls holding bottled water like refugees. And Jared was still pretending this was temporary. He sent an all-hands message blaming an external vendor. He promised a fix by end of day. He used the word hiccup 3 times. At 1:45, the fire suppression system issued a warning. Not an alarm. A warning. Heat trending toward threshold. The system politely suggested intervention. There was none. At 2:15, my phone rang again. This time it was the legal counsel for the property group. "Tess," she said, "we need confirmation that you are not intentionally degrading services." I answered calmly. "Services are aligned with contract status. Nothing more." She paused. Then she said what everyone else was thinking. "Is there any chance you will reopen negotiations?" I looked at the graph in front of me. Omnitech utilization stable. Next-gen temperature climbing. I said, "Negotiations require respect and authority. I am seeing neither." That evening, the building cameras captured something poetic. Jared standing in the executive hallway, jacket off, sleeves rolled, hair damp with sweat. He was shouting into his phone. Probably his father. Probably saying words like unacceptable and lawsuit and misunderstanding. The hallway glass reflected him back at himself, smaller than he imagined. Wednesday was worse. The building did not fail. It simply stopped compensating. Without priority routing, data packets collided. Without enhanced cooling, processors throttled. Without elevator preference, staff arrived late and left early. Morale followed gravity. By Thursday, half the floor was remote by necessity. The other half sat in an open-plan space with doors that no longer latched and conference rooms that offered no privacy. The power hierarchy dissolved into shared discomfort. At 4:20 on Thursday, the main system logged a manual override attempt. Breaker panel access denied. Jared had tried to force control. Marcus called me again, voice tight. "He is asking for you by name now," he said. "Says he will apologize." I leaned back in my chair. Apologies repair feelings, Marcus. They do not repair contracts. By Friday morning, the investors arrived. They walked into a floor that smelled like hot plastic and fear. The pitch was delayed, then shortened, then canceled. By noon, the phrase infrastructure risk appeared in 3 separate emails. At 1:30, next-gen stock dipped. At 2, the board scheduled an emergency session. At 3, my calendar received a request. Meeting request. Subject: resolution discussion. Attendees: Thomas Hale, Jared Hale, legal. I accepted it. Monday morning. Because some lessons require the weekend to settle in, and some floors need time to cool before anyone understands what they lost. By the time Monday morning arrived, the building had chosen sides. Skyline Tower did not care about titles or family trees. It cared about contracts, load thresholds, and whether the right people had respected the rules that kept 40 stories of steel and glass alive. Next-gen Synergies had done none of that. At 8:12 a.m., my monitoring dashboard lit up like a warning flare. Unauthorized access attempts. Multiple badge failures. Thermal alerts climbing steadily in Suite 3700. The system was not malfunctioning. It was behaving exactly as designed, gracefully degrading services no longer covered by contract. I watched calmly from my office on the 4th floor, tucked behind the mechanical core. This was where the real authority lived. No windows, no skyline views, just hum, vibration, and control. My phone rang. "Marcus, the building manager." "They are locked out, Tess," he said, voice tight. "Half the floor cannot get past the turnstiles. Jared is yelling at security again." I nodded even though he could not see me. "That is expected. He says the building is sabotaging him," Marcus added. "He wants maintenance to override the system." "Maintenance cannot override infrastructure," I said. "And you know that." "I know," Marcus sighed. "His father is on his way." That was sooner than I expected. At 8:40 a.m., Thomas Vance arrived. He walked into the lobby like a man accustomed to obedience, flanked by legal counsel, and a son who looked like he had not slept since Friday. Jared had traded his fleece vest for a wrinkled suit and a permanent scowl. They were escorted to the fourth floor. The conference room there was not designed to impress. No glass walls, no skyline. Just a rectangular table, fluorescent lighting, and soundproofing thick enough to swallow ego. Thomas spoke first. "Miss Morrison," he said, carefully neutral. "We are experiencing significant operational disruption." I folded my hands. "You terminated the service agreement." "My son made a mistake," Thomas replied. "He misunderstood your role." Jared stared at the table. "Mistakes have consequences," I said. "Especially public ones." Alan Sterling, their attorney, slid a folder toward me. "We are prepared to reinstate the agreement immediately. Same terms. Retroactive if necessary." I glanced at the folder and pushed it back. "Those terms no longer exist." Thomas stiffened. "Explain." "The capacity NextGen released on Friday has been reallocated," I said. "Fiber, cooling, priority access, all reassigned under a signed 5-year agreement." Jared looked up sharply. "Reallocated to who?" I met his eyes. "Omnitech." Silence landed hard. Thomas exhaled slowly. "You sold our infrastructure to our competitor." "I sold available infrastructure," I corrected. "You did not have a contract." Thomas leaned back, jaw tight. "Name your price. We will double it." "It is not for sale," I said. "Not to you." Jared slammed his hand on the table. "You cannot do this. You are destroying us." I tilted my head. "No. You fired me. Everything after that is math." Alan cleared his throat. "Miss Morrison, our client is losing tens of thousands per hour." "Then perhaps you should power down non-essential systems," I said. "Heat buildup accelerates failure." Jared stood abruptly. "This is retaliation." "This is compliance," I replied evenly. "You requested my removal." I complied fully. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment. Then he looked at his son. "You told me she was support staff," he said quietly. Jared did not answer. When Thomas looked back at me, the anger was gone, replaced by calculation. "What do you want, Tess?" I did not hesitate. "I want a clean exit. NextGen vacates the floor within 30 days. No litigation, no interference, no statements. In return, I will not pursue damages for harassment or breach." Thomas stared at me, then nodded once. "Done." Jared looked up in disbelief. "Dad?" "Enough," Thomas said sharply. The meeting ended without handshakes. As they left, I checked the dashboard. Temperature in Suite 3700 stabilized at 87 degrees. Servers throttling. Productivity collapsing. Infrastructure does not shout, it waits. And when the wrong people stop respecting it, it teaches them very quickly who was holding the building together. 6 months later, the Skyline Tower felt different. Not louder, not richer, quieter, settled, like a body that had finally expelled an infection and learned to breathe again. Omnitech occupied the 37th floor now. Their servers ran cool and silent. Their engineers submitted tickets instead of snapping fingers. They learned the rhythm of the building instead of trying to dominate it. I walked the floors every morning at 7:45, not because I had to, but because it reminded everyone that infrastructure is not magic. It is stewardship. On a Tuesday morning, Marcus met me by the freight elevators holding a clipboard and smiling like a man who had survived a hurricane. "They are gone," he said. NextGen Synergies had finished vacating the last storage unit overnight. No speeches, no press, just a quiet surrender of keys and a moving truck leaving before dawn. Jared Vance never came back. Word was he lasted 4 months in Tulsa. Copper wiring, shared cubicles, a boss who did not care whose son he was. His resignation email circulated quietly among executives like a cautionary tale no one wanted to claim they had read. Thomas Vance retired 3 weeks later. Officially, it was a planned transition. Unofficially, the board had lost patience with inherited arrogance. On my desk sits the original unsigned renewal contract. I keep it framed, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Power is invisible until it is removed. One afternoon, Robert Hale from Omnitech stopped by my office. He leaned against the doorframe, coffee in hand. "We are expanding again," he said. "Another floor, same terms as before." I nodded. "I will draft the amendment." Before he left, he hesitated. "I heard about what happened before we moved in," he said carefully. "About the last tenant." I did not correct him. Buildings have a right to their myths. Robert smiled faintly. "I just want you to know we appreciate how you run things here. Quietly. Professionally. That mattered more than any apology." Later that evening, I stood alone in the mechanical control room, watching the status lights pulse green. Temperature stable. Power balanced. Network clean. A building is like a company. You can decorate it endlessly, but if the foundation is ignored, it will betray you at the worst possible moment. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I let it ring. Some conversations do not deserve answers. I shut down the monitors and locked the cabinet. As I walked toward the elevator, the hum followed me, steady and patient. The tower remembered who fed it. It remembered who disrespected it, and it responded accordingly. The next morning, an intern from Omnitech introduced himself nervously. "Hi, I am Alex. Mr. Hale told me to find you first." I raised an eyebrow. "He said you are the reason this place works," Alex continued, "and that if I ever treated you like support staff, I would be unemployed before lunch." I smiled. "Good advice," I said. "Welcome to the building." As he walked away, I glanced once more at the framed contract. People think revenge is loud. It is not. It is precise. It is contractual. It is knowing exactly which valve to close and when. And when the dust settles, the ones who snap their fingers are always the first to realize they never controlled anything at all.